it's weird now in the schools how they are changing everything for this very, very tiny minority of children, and it's having these giant negative impacts on society. My son's girlfriend in school identifies as non-binary. She's 12. All of her friends are non-binary. These are perfectly normal, healthy little girls, and they're confused by all this propaganda, and they're trying to be cool, like 12-year-old girls will try to do. Is that happening in the schools out there as well?
You just froze up for a little bit after you said that they identified as non-binary.
Yeah, I'm saying that there's a lot of that happening in the schools here because little girls are
Yes.
impressionable. They want to
Yep.
be cool. This is hip.
Yep.
Are you seeing a lot of that in the schools there?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I mentioned the social contagion element of all of that around here. It's becoming, I think they're being nudged in that direction too. Like, if you're a tomboy or you want to have your hair short or you're a little bit more aggressive, well, maybe it's actually because you're a boy. And if you're
Yeah.
starting to get more attention because of that, and everybody when they're 12 and 13 goes through an identity crisis, that's part of being 12 and 13, right? So like you have this already kind of captive impressionable group of people, and then you're saying, well, actually, you might be a boy. And then they're like, maybe I am. And then you treat
Hmm.
them a little bit more special because of it. And then they feel like, pansexual is another word that gets thrown around all the time. So I think like, yeah. And actually like you, Matt, thanks for saying that. I wrote a book, in 2018, and I'm kind of in a weird place in Fairfax County because I wrote a book in 2018 which was published in August 2019, has a 2020 publication date because that's how the educational market works. It's called, I've written a lot of books for the educational market, but this one in particular is getting a ton of attention, Coping with Gender Fluidity. And basically, I kind of go through, the theory of gender and how this kind of stuff has happened. And I was really influenced because I grew up in a small town in rural Michigan, and the people who were outside of gender norms in my town were just bullied incessantly. One woman who she was like 18 at the time. She was a lesbian, and her girlfriend was in the front seat of the car with her, and she ran her car head on into a semi. So I have a lot of sympathy for people who live outside of gender norms. I think it was a direct result of depression from being bullied in a community which wasn't cool with that. Like in small town Michigan, back when I grew up, it wasn't something that people did. And if they did, they were made fun of a lot for it. So
Sure.
in 2018, a publisher approached me. I'm a writer by training. I've been doing it for a long time, but so a publisher approached me and said, I have this title, will you write this book? And I studied some gender stuff when I was in college, and I worked at Amnesty International with a women's officer. I interned with her for a while. So I've done a variety of things, and you can't really put me in a box. But so anyways, I wrote this book, and I basically Coping with Gender Fluidity. It's basically like I felt really compassionate for the community. I knew of a trans kid who grew up in the town that I was from. I felt just an enormous amount of kind of sympathy for what they were going through. I wrote this book before like the model trans policies and all the crazy stuff with the assaults in the bathrooms at the schools because of what they were doing, and the now even across the country there's like things with the litter boxes for the furries. Like this book was written before
Before it
all
got
this
nuts.
stuff.
Hmm.
Yes, thank you. So anyways, here in Fairfax County, I'm taking a lot of heat from the fringes on the far right and the far left, where they're both being like, you're a traitor. And I've been like libertarian small L my whole life, where it's kind of like, be who you are. I don't have
Right.
problems with you. I'm not going to try to dictate your life. I want to have a small government with limited power and freedom, and have sympathy for people. So basically like compassion without compulsion.
Hmm.
So anyways, I wrote this book, and now I'm also on the front lines of the parents' rights movements in the schools, where I'm like, you can't do this to our kids. You can't suspend them because they're not using the right pronoun. That's a violation of the First Amendment. Like that's
Yes.
compelled speech.
Yes.
So and some people have religious qualms with it. So I both of those things can coexist. You can have compassion for a group of people, and also be against the compulsion of all of the ridiculousness that they're trying to do to indoctrinate our children in schools. So
100%.
anyways, I'm at the crosshairs of this.
Well, I'm right there with you, because what you're talking about is liberty, and that's something the left used to embrace. They no longer do, for whatever reason. I think they've all been freaking brainwashed. But you're talking about liberty. Like if you want to get a sex change, you do you. You do you. I'm gonna be me over here, right? And I might call you she if you look like a she and I can remember it, but I'm not gonna memorize pronouns for 300 people if everybody has their own pronoun. I can't.
And you're making a sport out of changing it every day because you want attention. Yeah.
Yes, and and don't kid yourselves. That is happening. Kids are doing that. They're changing their pronouns a couple times a year for attention. It's happening. I see it here. So it's not, you see on the media, on the left media, they talk about this like, oh, that's just paranoia, whatever. No, it's happening.
It is happening.
If you have children in middle school, you see it happening. Look, I can't imagine what it must be like to be a 12-year-old kid about to go through puberty and you feel like you're trapped inside the wrong body. Every kid going through puberty feels like that a little bit. Now imagine feeling like you feel like your gender is wrong. I don't know if that's body dysmorphia. I don't know if it's possible to have the brain of one gender and the genitals of another. I don't know. I'm not
a psychologist.
Yeah, I'm not Mr. Science Tony Fauci. I don't know. Yeah. But I know that person deserves compassion, and we should try to help that person. We are not helping that person by pushing them all in one direction,
or suggesting they should medicalize their confusion.
Yes, and we should give you pills that will stop you from having puberty, because 90% of these kids might cause cancer. And 90% of these kids, when left alone, they eventually figure it out, and they might end up being gay or butch girls or whatever. But you give them those chemicals, you've now screwed them up for life. If they're not going to go through the transition, well, you got boys running around with tiny little micro penises. You know what's less fun than being confused about your gender is having a tiny little pecker as a grown man. That's not fun, right? That I'm not speaking from experience.
I can only imagine.
Right. So we're not being, in an attempt to be compassionate, we are not being compassionate. We are hurting these kids.
I agree. And the other thing I would say, Matt, is I feel like the left used to believe in liberty, or they used to claim that they did, and the right used to really claim that they cared about, the far right and the far left I'm talking about. Far right used to really claim that they cared about compassion. And I think we need both. We need liberty and compassion, and those things need to return to. We have neither. To all of us. Yes. Yeah. And I think in the middle we do. There's plenty of us in the middle. I find I'm in particular getting attacked by the fringes from the far right and the far left. So whatever. Yeah. I'm still gonna, be me and do as I do.
Well, I'm grateful to you. I'm grateful for your kids for being brave and taking on a fight that they believe in. I'm grateful to you for supporting them and for taking on the fight you're taking on. People are afraid. I think most people do not like what's going on in the schools, but most people are cowards. Yes. We need people like you who are not cowardly, who are willing to stand up for people who are, not everyone's capable of taking the fight to the man. But everyone is capable of at least showing some love and support to those who will take that fight to the man. So I hope you say you're taking a lot of heat from the left and the right. That's normal. That's going to happen. But I hope you're also getting some love. Hope some people are expressing some love to you for the battle you're taking.
Thanks, Matt. And I appreciate that. And it's in a state of conflict, you always find who your friends are. And the women at the Independent Women's Network have just been amazing to me. I mean, in terms of like when we were going through the mask stuff, and that's really how I met them, was in the throes of all of this. So anyways, like it's just such a supportive network. Like you really do find your people when you're going through adversity. So
100%, man. Like I learned that so much at the beginning of COVID when I started speaking against the narrative. Like, wow, like you really find out quickly about your friends when you do or say something controversial, and then that person turns their back on you or that person is in your corner. And it seemed to me to be about 50-50, which was very surprising to me because I thought I had a stronger network than that.
Yeah, or they just get really quiet and like lay low just to see what happens, you know. But then you find the people who are really in your corner, and you just treasure them even more. So that's been
Absolutely.
what the great thing that's come out of all of this, I think.